I've attended my brother Daryl's church. I used this once at over in Burlington, and so at least part of it you will be familiar with. But I just kept coming back to this topic, and as I listened to the music this morning, I understand why. Because this is what he wants for this morning. I want to draw your attention to Mark chapter 6. The first chapel that I spoke in this year, I spoke about Moses and God asking him, "What is in your hand?" Yesterday, Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever it was, 2 days ago, seems like a year since then, I spoke about very personal matters and how God has helped me to work my way through some of the limitations and that kind of thing. This falls somewhere between those two. I want to speak to you this morning about when your best is not enough. All right? When your best is not enough. And several years ago now, I was down in southern Mexico in the state of Oaxaca, and I was teaching along with a couple of our national men, teaching in a pastor's retreat. And we were up on top of the mountain in a place, one of my favorite places, a place called Bugambilias. And I love it. It's beautiful. You're sitting on top of a mountain. When I got up there, they had prepared a place for us to have the conference. And I was one of like 18 people in a van. And so it was very crowded. And we suddenly pulled off along the side of the road, and there was this slash going up the side of it. Looked like they had taken a bulldozer up there. And so I stopped and I turned to our national president and I said, what's happening? They said, "Oh, this is where we're going to have the retreat." I said, "Oh, great." And I walked up that little trail, you could get a four-wheel drive up there, but it was really rough. And I got up on top, and they had bulldozed a place about as wide as from these pillars over to the side wall. They just bulldozed the side of the mountain off and just pushed it over, and that was it. There was nothing there. It was dirt. There were big old rocks. And I got up there, and I'm sort of looking around, and I sort of grinned, and I said, "This is where we're going to have the pastor's retreat?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, where are we going to have services?" They said, "Oh, right here." And they said, "Here." And they turned around, and there was a couple of guys carrying a big tarp that they use over a big remolque doble, a double 18-wheeler. They tie it down on top to keep things from blowing out and all, and big old long tarp. And they said, "It's right here." And the only thing that I could see on that was just this sheared off place, and there were 4 posts, and between these two there was a tree. It looked like they just cut a tree down and laid it on top. And over on the next 2, they cut a tree down and laid it on top. And they brought in this huge tarp, and we threw it up over top and stretched it out and staked it out. Some guys climbed the palm trees and tied it off back on either side, so the 4 corners were there. And that provided a little framework, and basically all it did was give us some shade. And then they brought in homemade tables and plank benches and set them on either side. They did have a restroom. It was just down over the side, and they had 2 lavender color plastic bags that they had split in half and opened them up. And they tacked them to the bushes to give you a little privacy. So if you're standing here looking down, you had a little privacy wall. Now, it was sort of a two-edged sword, because if you went down there and went around behind the plastic barricade, no one can see you from up on top. And you say, "Oh, that's pretty good." And then you turn around, and behind you is the whole village. And people are saying, oh, hermano, ¿cómo estás? Well, right now, in this moment, I'm not doing so well because if I climb on the other side of this plastic, then all my, hello, brother. What's happening down there, you know? So we gathered in to have services, and I looked around, and there were 3 guys that had guitars. One of them was Pastor Cuco, who was our national president. His name is actually Refugio Sanchez. It's just easier to say Cuco. And he had his guitar, and he does well. He can play well. And there was another guy, Chito, that had a guitar, and he plays. All right. There's another guy that had a guitar. Now, you could use their guitars as weapons because when they put the strings on, they don't cut them off. I mean, they're just curling everywhere out the end, and if anyone attacks, you just, you know, you got all these things out there like a lightning bolt or something. And so we were getting ready to sing, and Cuco could play, and we decided on a song, and he said, I'm going to be playing in the key of G, and you know, I got this music here that our brother gave me, and it's got these words, Lord, I need you, and above it is C, G, C, EM7, D, CAD 9, C, G, C, G, EM, D, C. That's Navajo code for back during the war. So this other guy says, okay. But the thing about it was, all he could play was in C. He couldn't play in anything but C. There's no problem. The other guy, he didn't know anything about keys and that kind of thing. He did know 2 chords. They may have been from the same key. They may have been from different keys. But he knew 2 chords. So we were ready to sing. And Cuco strummed and set the tempo and all, and then we started off. And over here is Brother Cuco, and he's got his head thrown back, and he's playing and singing, and he's in the key of G. And then this other brother's right here, and he's playing, had his head thrown back and singing, but he's in the key of C. And then there's this fella. And he concentrated on his finger position, and then he just started strumming until these fingers got tired. And then he had changed position, and then he had strumming. So we have G and C and also, okay? And I'm standing there, and I just have to confess, and Brother Crater, I'm sitting there grinning, and I'm thinking, where in the world is Garen Wolf or Tim Crater? They need to hear this. And I was grinning. And we were making a joyful noise to the Lord. Joyful noise. And I was sort of tickled. I actually pulled out my phone and started to take a video of it. I said, I've got to take this back and let my wife see it. And then suddenly the whole perspective changed. Because God settled down on top of that mountain. Those men were worshiping God. I mean, they were truly worshiping from their heart and soul. And God settled down. And I have never sensed the presence of God any more clearly than I did that morning. I felt like it was the Mount of Transfiguration. I felt like God had just come and sat right down among us. And you know what happened? Suddenly, I didn't hear the key discrepancy. Suddenly, I wasn't focused on the noise or the music or any other classification you want to put on it. Because suddenly, we were in the presence of the Holy God, and we were bowing at his feet and worshiping. You see, a lot of times we focus on the wrong things. and our measuring stick is skewed. And guys, you need to really dig in and bear down and learn to preach and preach well. But you can have a little something that catches the attention and hooks the audience at the first, and you can have all of your points delineated and they can all be alliterative and all of that, and you can have good, well-rounded, engaging illustrations along the way and a perfect clincher at the end to close it. And if God isn't in it, it's just words. Did you know that God didn't promise to bless your word? He promised to bless his word. And those of you that are in music, I love music. Got to be a lot in me because not too much has ever come out. All right, I really like music. It soothes me. But you can perform the most complex thing and do all of these. Well, I better not go there. I'll tell you more. I've already told you more than I know. Do all of these things, and it can just be breathtaking. But if God isn't in it, it's hollow. It's sounding brass. It's tinkling cymbals. You can be a magnificent artist, and you can paint and just make it feel like you just walk right into that picture. But if that is a ministry and God is not in it, then it's just mud on a board. All right? So there's a couple of things we need to understand. Number one, there's not a person in here that is good enough to do the job on their own. Your best, sir, your best, ma'am, is not enough. You cannot touch the heart and change the brokenness of the soul in your own strength. I don't care how good you are. Your best is not enough. On the other hand, what happens when I have my heart in the right place and my soul is filled with God and I have the anointing and I do the best that I can do and it's still not enough? Is that possible? According to Scripture, it is. Look with me at Mark chapter 6. We'll begin reading in verse 32. The disciples had just come back from doing ministry, and they were excited. A lot of things, good things had happened. But Jesus looked at them and understood that they needed a break. Sometimes, guys, as my mother would say, the most spiritual thing you can do is rest. She said, if you don't, the devil will use your tiredness as a tool against you. Okay? So there comes a point in all of our labor doing good things for a holy God with a heart that is pure and right. Sometimes he says, look, Steve, you need to come apart and rest for a while. That's what he said to the disciples here. Verse 32. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of the cities, and out went them, and came together unto him. Basically, in modern day English, they realized where he was going, and they beat him there. So when he got to this place apart, they were already waiting for him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw much people, and was moved with compassion toward them, because they were a sheep not having a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. I love that phrase right there. He has drawn his disciples apart to take a break. But when he gets there and sees the hurting multitude, the heart of Christ was moved with compassion, and he sat down right where he was and began to teach. And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, this is a desert place, and now the time is far spent. Send them away that they may go into the country round about and into the villages, and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. And he answered and said unto them, Give ye them to eat. And they said unto him, Shall we go and buy 200 penny worth of bread, and give them to eat? And he said unto them, How many loaves have ye? Go and see. And when they knew, they said, 5 and 2 fishes. And he commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks by hundreds and by 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up into heaven and blessed and brake the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fishes divided he among them all. And they did all eat and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments and of the fishes. And they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 men. And in the other accounts, in the other Gospels, it includes women and children. All right? So in all 4 Gospels, you have this account. And what we see is the disciples had been actively engaged in ministry. They were doing their best, but they came to a point where they needed to take a break. And when they got there, their time alone was disrupted by the people once again pressing in. And Jesus began to teach them. And notice how tuned in the disciples were. They were there. They no doubt had to be frustrated. Because you know how you get, you think you're going to have the evening off, and then you find out that something else is scheduled, and all of your plans have to be shattered, and you have to come back and do that. And so you're a little bummed, and they're watching him work with the people. It was a common sight, something that they participated in on a daily basis. And it got down toward evening, and they were sensitive to the needs of the people. I mean, after all, they're in ministry. And they said, Lord, it's been a long day. It's late. These people are tired. They're hungry. Let's send them home. Let them go get food to eat and a place to rest. And Jesus turned right back to them and he said, No, I want you to give them something to eat. Now, he was the one that understood they were physically and emotionally depleted. They were exhausted after active, engaging ministry. But now, in the face of that, he says, now that your well is dry, I still want you to give them something to eat. And their response is, Lord, you got to send them home. If we use 200 pennyworth, and most commentaries feel like that's probably the amount of money they had in their treasury, all right? So if we spend everything we have, it's like we have this big loaf of French bread, and we all line up, and I take a bite and hand it to my left, and he takes a bite and hands it to his left, and everyone gets one bite. They said, it's not enough. We've done our best. If we used everything we had, it still wouldn't be enough. So their best was not enough. I can give you a number. You go over to 2 Kings chapter 4. You remember Elisha had left the brook Cherith, and he was going and he saw the widow woman. He said, oh, bake me a cake. She said, all we have is a handful of a meal and a little bit of oil in the cruse. And he said, well, make me a cake first. And she's saying, I don't have enough. We're going to eat it and die. But he said, give me one first. And when she did, her cruse of oil never went dry. And her barrel was never empty. And for the rest of the drought, God provided. You see, that's part of what he wants us to understand. When we have done absolutely everything we can, and our best has been given to him, and it's still not enough, he is always there with his hands outstretched and says, bring it to me, and I will make up the difference. Young people, God doesn't ask you to do his work by yourself. It is a double yoke. And the one on the other side of that yoke is none other than the Son of God that is laying into that harness, and he is pulling. And when you can't, he can. And when you're empty, he's full. And when you have expended your resources, he said, I haven't even begun. And if we go back to that first message, Lord, all I've got is a stick. He said, yeah, but you're on one end and I'm on the other end. We can carry the world with our stick. All right? There's lots of others. We could look at Elisha. Well, let's see. The Midianites, you remember? And the Lord looked down and he said, no. He said, you have too many men. If I give you the victory with this many men, you'll take the credit for it. So you need to get rid of them. And finally, he whittles it down until there's only 300. And they're not equipped with assault rifles, AK-47s. They didn't have a bazooka. They didn't have a rocket launcher. What did they have? They had a trumpet. They had a candle or a torch. They had a clay pitcher. They had their voice para gritar, all right, to shout out. But the most powerful thing they had was the God of the universe. And they were fighting his battle. Everyone knows that you don't win wars and battles when you're going up against horses and iron chariots and steel armor and all of the archers and all this kind of. You don't win it with torches and clay pitchers and trumpets. But you do win when God's on your side. And when you have given the best that you can give, and it's still not enough, then he makes up the difference. They said, Lord, we don't have enough funds. We don't have enough food. There's nothing that we can do to meet this need. He said, what do you have? Go and see. And they said, we have one boy that has 5 little bitty biscuits and 2 sardines. I don't know if that's the size of things, but basically 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And then he said something that is so important, so key to what ministry is all about. He said, bring what you have to me. And they brought it and they gave it all into his hands. And when he had all they had to give, he blessed it and he broke it and he gave it back to them. All right? Now, God's a God of order. He said, have them sit down. I like the detail. It's different in every account. On this particular place, they had been in the battle. They went away to a desert place, and so you think the backside of, maybe it was up on top of the mountain where I was in Oaxaca, but it wasn't. Because here it says, have them sit down on the green grass. You see, he leads us beside still waters. He feeds us where the pasture is green and filling and energizing. He said, have them sit down on the green grass in groups of 50 and 100. And then when he had offered thanks and he broke it, he gave it to them and he said, now you take the best that you have with my blessing and give it to them. And in that moment, a divine miracle took place because they began to give it, and it says they gave it to all of them. Let me see, verse 41, Verse 42, and they did all eat, and all of them were filled. When I was a kid, I took 5 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to school every day. I'd eat 3 of them on the bus. I made a deal with a kid in school whose parents thought they were rich or wanted us to think they were rich, and he loved peanut butter and jelly, and his mom and dad wouldn't send it. They said, no, that's a poor person's food. So they sent him ham sandwiches, and he didn't like ham. So I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid. And I said, I got 1 peanut butter jelly sandwich that I'll trade for 2 ham sandwiches. And if you bring me 2 more, I'll give you a second peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I'd eat 3 on the way and trade the other 2 for 4 more and eat them. You know what that means? That means 5 loaves and 2 fish isn't going to cut it. Just with me. All right? And it wasn't enough for those people apart from God. But when God touches our offering, and God touches our life, and God takes what we have to offer, and we yield it completely into His hands, a transformation takes place, and you have enough to meet the needs of the people that He sent you to serve. And they ate, and they ate, and they ate until all of them were filled. But God still wasn't done giving. You see, He was teaching them a lesson that was critical to their whole life and ministry. He said, now here's what I want you to do. Make sure that nothing is wasted. I want you to go and pick up all the leftovers. Now, tell me, how many disciples did they have? Did He have? How many did you say? 12, yeah. They went and picked up all the leftovers. Trey, how many baskets of leftovers did they have? 12. Is that coincidental? I think not. You see, they understood they didn't have sufficient to meet the need. But when they gave what they could to God and He blessed it, He not only met the need, but He said, I am taking you apart to this place to replenish you, and here's your own personal basket of leftovers. Because you need to understand, when you have reached the end of your hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. And it was more than enough. All right? I want to close. I'm trying to make up for holding you over after last time. No, I'm not really. You can see I don't suffer from being underfed. So I got Snickers and Oreo cookies in the room. I want to close with 2 personal illustrations, all right? On the one hand, we have to understand that nothing we can do in ourselves is sufficient, all right? It doesn't matter how talented you are. On Wednesday, I talked about my struggles with dyslexia, and God has helped me in a marvelous way. I go into Mexico and spend a couple of weeks, and I'm the only person that speaks English. So any communication that has to be done, I do it, and God helps me. And He has never let me down, never. As I mentioned, as I get weary physically and mentally, then my dyslexia ramps up. And then that's where I get that frozen thing where I just cannot think and my mind just won't function. I drive all day and then I look up and read a billboard and my family cracks up laughing. And I said, it doesn't say that, does it? And they said, no, it doesn't. So what does it say? And they tell me, and it didn't even come close to what it was actually there. And we laugh about it, all right? It's just a part of who I am and the struggles that I have, and you come to grips with that. I had been down to southern Mexico, and we have a bunch of churches in the mountains. And I had a lot going on, but I needed to make that trip, so I was down there. And I was trying to, normally instead of spending a week, I was trying to visit all the churches and pastors in 2 or 3 days. So I was just running nonstop. The day before, I had preached 4 times, had a baby dedication, a baptismal, and a house dedication. All right? That doesn't include the hikes up into the mountains. That morning I had gotten up. I had already preached 3 times and had another baby dedication. And I got done with my last sermon, and I had about 10 minutes to run out, grab my suitcases. They were sitting in the back of the church, and run out to the main road to pick up the express going back to Oaxaca City, because the next morning my plane flew out. So I told everyone bye, grabbed my luggage, ran out, and just as I got to the street, here came the bus around the corner. It's a little express van, and they stopped, and they threw my luggage up on top. I got in, and we took off. I had a large suitcase, and they had room for it on top, but it was hanging there, and they threw a cargo net over it and strapped it down. But I had a little carry-on that they didn't have room to put there. And so I got in, and as I got in, right on the right, there was an individual seat there, and that was the only seat that was open. So I sat there, and I set that little carry-on luggage right between my feet. And so I sat there with it, and we had just taken off, and the man just across the aisle looked over at me and asked me if I was from Switzerland. And I'm like, no. And he pointed to my luggage. The logo on my luggage was Swiss, like a Swiss knife, that name brand. And I laughed. I said, oh, no, I'm from the United States. I'm not from Switzerland. Actually, I was down here, and my luggage got stolen, and I had to go to Walmart here in Mexico, and this was the suitcase that I bought just to put my things in to go back home. And this was a couple of times ago. So, no, it's just my luggage. All of this is in Spanish. And so then we were just across the aisle, so we struck up a conversation. And we're talking back and forth, and all of it's in Spanish. And he was there working with a humanitarian aid group, and he had signed up to live for 2 years in Oaxaca, the state of Oaxaca in southern Mexico. And we were talking about that, and then he said, so why are you here? And I said, well, I'm a missionary. And he said, a missionary, what's that? And so I began to talk to him, and then he said, oh, okay. And it opened up into a conversation, and he began to ask me questions about God, and I found real soon that he was sort of a twisted mix between modernism and postmodernism and New Age, and he said, well, I believe, I guess I believe in God. I think, I don't know if I would call him God, but I think that there had to be a higher being someplace that put this all here. But then I think he just made it and went away. I don't think he interacts with us. And all of this is in Spanish. My mind is fried. I have been running up and down the mountains. I have been preaching my heart out. I'm weary, and I'm sitting there trying to be real theological in Spanish with this guy. And I'm saying, oh, Lord, you've got to help me. This guy needs to understand what the power of grace does in a heart, and that God loves him, and that he came to die and save him. And I'm just continually from my heart saying, oh, God, help me. Give me the words. We talked in Spanish along this line, really deep stuff as he's asking all kinds of searching questions. And it went on for 3.5 hours. We finally got up, normally about 3 hours, 3.5 in. We stopped for a break because we have another couple of hours to get to the city. And so we stopped, and just as we pulled off the road and stopped, someone said something, and he responded in English. I mean, just as clear as what I was doing. And I just been saying, Lord, give me the words, help me. This guy needs to understand this is an opportunity. I thank you for that. But you know that I'm weary and you're going to have to help me and give me the words. And God had been just spoon feeding me the words all along. And suddenly he talks in English and I said, do you understand English? Oh, sure, he said. My response was, oh, thank God. He understands English. I can do this in English. Now, please understand me. I wasn't being egotistical. I wasn't rebelling. I wasn't pushing God away. I had just been struggling for 3 hours to keep up with that cutting edge talk in another language. And suddenly I realized he understood where I'm coming from and he can understand everything perfect in my language. And I said, yes, I can do this if I can do it in English. Now let me tell you something, young people. We got back on the bus and within 10 minutes, I had lost him. His name was Dak. And in 10 minutes, he clammed up and he wouldn't respond to one single word of the gospel from that point on. What was the difference? I promise you it was not intentional. But suddenly, he hit my comfort zone. And I could explain things to him, at least I thought I could, so that he could understand if I could do it in English. And I lost him. Someday, I will stand before God, and I just pray that the words that God gave me, that he blessed those and pierced the heart of this young man. I'll never see him again, probably. And I lost him through no intentional effort at all. But young people, we are not sufficient for the task when we do it on our own strength. It didn't matter if he spoke English and understood me, the language. I had to have God's help for him to understand from the heart. And when I grew comfortable and stopped calling on God, the door was shut. On the other hand, I think I mentioned this in a prayer meeting. I had to go down to that same region to deal with a problem. We had one of our pastor of our largest church that actually fell into an immoral situation, and we had to go deal with it. And I had got up and left my home about 3:30 in the morning. I'd gone to McAllen, to Houston, then to Mexico City, then to Oaxaca City. And then from there, the guys had gone on as I told them to. If I wasn't there, I grabbed the shuttle, the express shuttle down. It was another 5.5, 6 hours down to where they were. I got in like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I went straight into meetings with the national board, and we're in meetings until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And as we came out of those meetings talking about all the things we were going to do, we had three meetings set up, like 8:30 to 9, 9 to 9:30, and 9:30 to 10. We were going to meet with the pastor and his wife and the chairman of the board. We were going to meet with the local church board, and then we were going to meet with the family, because about 35% of the church congregation were all a part of the family. And so we were going to meet there, and I told the guys, I said, look, you're going to have to pray for me. I am just wiped out. I cannot do this. God's going to have to give me a special touch. In the morning, we're going to have to hit the ground running. I'm going to have to be able to understand everything that is said. I'm going to have to articulate the things that they need to understand. And you're going to have to, and they said, oh, we have been praying all along the way that God would touch you. But they surrounded me and they put their hands on me and prayed that God would anoint me and touch me and give me the words to say. The next morning we started and we had prayer again before. They said, God's going to help you, brother. We're here. We're praying for you, and He'll give you what you need. We got in that first thing, and the pastor had lied about a lot of things, said it was just us setting him up because we wanted to move him out and put someone else in. That actually, he said that I wanted to pastor the church. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that from the border, but and all of this, and I said, there's no way, so we finally got through that, and he confessed, and then we were just ready to go into the meeting with the church, the national church board, and suddenly they kicked the door in. The family did. There was like 45 members of his family, and they were furious because he had told them the same lies. And these people are saying, you can't do that. That's not right. That's not just. And they kicked the door in. They came in, and I'm just looking, and boy, they were ready to punch someone in the face. I thought they were going to. And I'm standing there and I'm saying, oh, Lord, this is really out of control. You're going to have to help me. I don't know what to say. I can't think fast enough. My mind's sluggish this morning. You're going to have to help me. And at one point, a good friend of mine, he was there and he was angry. And I went up and I just touched him on the shoulder and I said, hermano. And he backhanded me right across my chest. I just knocked me back in the wall, and I'm saying, Lord, if you don't help us, something bad's going to happen. And I'm watching, and suddenly the Lord said, now, Steve. And it just, before I realized it, I was standing out in the middle of that floor. And basically, in Spanish, I said, shut up! And I never, ever said that before. And they whirled around and looked at me, and suddenly, God touched me, and I began to talk. And right in the middle of it, I realized that I was using words that I didn't even know I knew. I mean, the Lord was giving me the words to say so fast, and I began to talk, and the Spirit of God began to settle down, and a couple of the other pastors were talking, and I just stood and watched as the Spirit of God settled down, and they became broken, and they began to fall on their knees and pray, and before long they're over with their arms around their brother, and they're asking for forgiveness, and God settled down there, and healing was brought about, and all of that, and I'm just looking on with eyes wide open, just in wonder. And when I got done, I was coming out, and they said, oh, hermano, said, God helped you. I said, oh, I know He helped me. I said, guys, I was using words that I didn't even know. They said, we know. You were using words that we didn't know. They said, well, we understood them, but it wasn't the words that we would have used, but they were perfect. They were exactly, you said exactly what needed to be said. And I said, oh, brothers, I didn't say it. God said it. I simply was the conduit that he flowed through. My best didn't even touch it. It wasn't anywhere near enough. But when I gave my best to Him, the job was accomplished. Some of you are exceedingly talented. Thank God for that. Give all of those talents to Him. Some of you feel like you can't do anything, that you're broken, that you're so limited. Give your brokenness, your limited abilities, everything about you to Him. And He said, bring it to me. And when He had taken it, He blessed it. And then He gave out. And not only did it meet the needs of the people, but they were blessed and filled beside. Sometimes your best is not enough. But always, when you give it to God, it's perfect for the situation. And there's more besides for you to live on. God bless you.